Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Linked. And in this episode, we will be talking to Howdy Pierce. He's the chairman and founder of Cardinal Peak. And in today's conversation, we will be taking a deeper dive into the importance of networking and how to build long lasting relationships.
I don't know exactly what company I was going to do, but I think I'd always had this idea that it was better to kind of stand on your own 2 feet and figure stuff out. And I'm not maybe the smartest guy out there, but I'm not the dumbest either. And so I kind of figure I can outsmart some of the other idiots who were doing this. The VCs in the US mostly feel that if you can't figure out how to network to them, you also can't figure out how to network to your customer.
Can all of us be AI not allowed on a podcast?
By the way, anybody who's listening, if you're ever arrested, heaven forbid, okay, your answer needs to be, I want my lawyer, and then shut up. And occasionally people figure out my phone number and they call me and I let that go to voicemail and I delete the voicemail. And once in a blue moon, I accidentally answer it and then I get angry at them because like they bother me and so that's a crappy way to do business, right? Way better is to go find your way into somebody who I know and then have that person that I know make an introduction, because that I will absolutely respond to. I may still not buy your stuff, but at least I'll have a conversation. And the same thing's true about the venture capitalists.
Hi, Howdy. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so happy to have you over here on our podcast.
Great to be here. Good to join you guys.
Thank you. So just a small brief to our audience as well about what we discussed earlier, that the episode today will be concentrating on how to network like a CEO. So with that, let's just get started.
Sure. Howdy. The first question we'd like to start with, can you help us understand more about why you started as an entrepreneur and what your journey as an entrepreneur has looked like so far?
Well, okay. So I never had envisioned myself doing anything else. From the time I can first think about being in a, I don't know, when I was 10 or something. My father had his own business. It was not a large business. He sold life insurance, but he was an individual person. From time to time, he had maybe one employee at most, and that wasn't all the time. So I don't know if that's relevant at all, but and my grandfather on my mother's side had also had his own company. So perhaps I grew up just thinking that's the way you make money. But I don't really recall. I also don't listen to other people well. I don't take instruction well. So perhaps the idea of having a job permanently, I don't know. I mean, that's never something I questioned. Okay. I had always, I don't know exactly what company I was going to do, but I think I'd always had this idea that it was better to kind of stand on your own 2 feet and figure stuff out. And I'm not maybe the smartest guy out there, but I'm not the dumbest either. And so I kind of figure I can outsmart some of the other idiots who were doing this. I don't know. I mean, I don't have a good answer for that. I'm sorry. So about my journey, so I did obviously I was in tech. Well, actually, I should tell you, my first entrepreneurship experience, or my first experience leading something, wasn't really starting something, was actually in college. So when I was in college, I was on the school newspaper, worked for the school newspaper. I have a double, my undergraduate, I have a double major in math and writing, which is weird, from Carnegie Mellon. And so I went to this super technical school and I figured out how to make a liberal arts degree out of it. And so as a part of the writing part of that, I was involved with the school newspaper. And when I was there, they've changed it. But when I was there, the school newspaper was a completely independent corporation. So it was not owned by the university. There was no adult supervision. It was just a bunch of students who got together and, we had our own bank account, and we thought of ourselves as running a business that had to show at least a break even. I mean, there was no owners that were taking profit out, but we had to at least break even. Now, in fairness, that was a very easy business to run, because when you are the school newspaper in the late 80s at a place like Carnegie Mellon, you have all these recruiters coming to town who want to hire CMU graduates. And what do they do before they come to town is they take out a full page ad in the newspaper to advertise to the students that they're going to be interviewing. So we had all these blue chip companies who would just call us up, and I mean, we could have charged anything in retrospect. They had no choice. They wanted to advertise to our market. We didn't think of it that way, but anyway, so we thought of it as we had to turn a slight profit, right? We just had to break even. And I got involved in that and became we called it the editor in chief. But in practice, actually, that was much more of a CEO role than a writing role. So that was my first experience. And we had a staff of, a staff, okay? We had 100 plus students who worked for us in some way. Perhaps, 30 of them probably got paid in some very small way, right? We're talking, not much money. But there was a team, and there were politics, and there were people who felt passionately that we should do thing one or thing two when we'd argue about it. So that was my first experience actually like running a business. It was a great little starter thing to do. So anyway, I came out of college. I worked in industry for 8 years or something before I started my own company. In gradually increasing kind of managerial roles for most of that time, all in technical engineering roles. And then I was at a startup, so I had even within that I had gone to a startup that was called Divicom at the time. And just to give you some background, Divicom was headquartered in Silicon Valley, which is where I lived at the time, and it made real-time video encoders. So this is the device that takes uncompressed video in on one side and turns out compressed video on the other side. And in the 90s, you could not do that in software on an x86 machine, or at least you couldn't do it with any degree of quality. So you had a ton of these very special purpose chips, ASICs, that would compress this video in real time. And this was the kind of the key innovation that was necessary to allow people like DirecTV and Dish Network, and eventually the cable guys, Comcast and the like, came much later. But it was the key innovation that allowed digital video to become a thing, right? So when I started at that company, the majority of the people in the world were watching analog video, and it gradually became digital. So anyway, we happened to be, there were a number of companies we were competing with, but we happened to be at the right place at the right time, and it was a great, very entrepreneurial company. So I learned a lot from folks who were running it at the time. But I, at that point, was getting an itch to do something myself. I was fortunate in that my current business partner was one of the founders of Divicom. He and I got to be good friends. He was out here in Boulder, and I wanted to move to Colorado, so that worked out okay. And rather than let us completely leave, the company told us that they would fund a business unit that we could start. So we did that for about 6 months. I used that. They moved me out here during that period to Colorado. And then we eventually did. It became a pain in their side because we were a little bit afield from what they were trying to do. And as they tried to explain to their investors and people that what the heck they were doing with these, at that point, I think we had 3 employees and there's 5 of us total. What the hell are these 5 guys out in Boulder doing? It became easier for them to look at that as a pure investment rather than a business. And so we were able to spin that out as a separate company with their blessing. They were behind that. And of course, therefore, we had an ownership stake. They still had an ownership stake, and then we raised venture capital. And so that company became known as Bantam, which that was, I guess I moved here in 99, very early 99, late 98, really. And then I ran that company into the ground in 2001. So we unfortunately we did raise a decent amount of venture capital. We had an introductory product. We had a very brief article in the Wall Street Journal written about us, and then the 2001 tech downturn happened, and we were unable to raise our second round. So we basically ran out of money. It's kind of a long story. When things at a startup go badly, the wheels start coming off the bus and it gets ugly. So that all happened, but unfortunately, but that was my first experience running a company, and I failed at it. So got to lay off a bunch of people. That was not any fun. Then Ferk and I, my business partner and I, we've always been, it's a little bit like a second marriage for both of us. We've always been, I think we're relatively good complements to each other. But in any event, we were still friends, and we didn't have any. We were a little bit frustrated with our venture capital investors, but we had no problems with each other. So we were actually planning or trying to think of our next product company. What would we do next? One of the great things about the tech industry and venture capitalists is that they don't look at a failure as a negative strike against it. So even though we had not succeeded with Phantom, we'd gotten a lot of experience. So I guess kind of, paid for by our investors, we learned a lot about starting a business and running it, failing at it, but running sales, trying to turn a profit and all that stuff. So anyway, we incorporated Cardinal Peak in 2002, early 2002. We did not actually intend that Cardinal Peak was going to be our next company. It was just going to be a little LLC, just a partnership, basically. For the two of us to do some consulting under, we had a couple of, as people found out that we were no longer with Phantom, we had a couple of people approach us for very small consulting gigs. And so we incorporated Cardinal Peak as just a company under which we could take in some consulting work and, maybe pay some of our bills. And we didn't, as a result, we didn't give any thought. The name was not deeply thought out. It came from, Perk went to Stanford. So Cardinal comes from the Cardinal and Stanford.
Okay.
We were in Colorado, so we go, let's make it sound like it's a mountain. So we made Cardinal Peak. I don't think we could be bothered to even do the Google search on our own name at first. It turns out there is a Cardinal Peak in Washington State. It's not impressive. It's like some 7,000-foot mountain, whatever. But we could get the .com and the trademark. We did know enough to maybe not do a Google search, but we do enough to do a trademark search real quickly. And so we were able to register the LLC. And so, and by the way, registering an LLC, I think in most states, but in Colorado, it costs like $100. It's nothing. So we opened a bank account, and I think we each put in a few $1,000s just to pay. We each bought a computer out of it because we were running on old hardware. And then that was it. That's how we started the company. And we didn't have dreams at that time or intentions at that time to really hire anybody other than the two of us or make it something that was going to last for any period of time. It was just going to be a temporary thing while we figured out our next step. What happened, in fact, was that the consulting work kind of took off. And so we got busier and busier. And we did certainly do sales for that. It's not, I don't want you to at all think that we put up a web page, we put out our phone number, and people started, phone started ringing off the hook. There were definitely periods where we were looking for work, but we were able to generate enough work to keep ourselves busy. And about maybe, I don't remember exactly, but I'm going to say 8 or 9 months after we incorporated, we had so much work that we hired an employee. And so when I say hired, we actually hired him as what's called a 1099. It has to do with the tax code here. So you have two choices when you want to have somebody work for you, right? So one choice is you can hire them as an actual honest to goodness employee. We normally call that a W-2 employee, named after the tax form that we give the employee at the end of it. And so that's what most people think of as an employee that gets a paycheck and all that stuff. There's another category which most people would call, at least they call it a contractor, where instead, like Deekshith, if I wanted to hire you, I would, you'd have to have your own little company. I don't really care how you do it, whatever. You could pay your own $100 to the state, and then I merely have a business-to-business transaction between my company and your company. I'm not paying you any benefits. Normally in tech, at least, I mean, you could have any sort of compensation rate that you wanted. Normally in tech, you would pay the person an hour. So we did that. So we had our first employee was somebody who we induced to we needed to help, and he was a smart guy. So we induced him to create his own company. He didn't have one beforehand, and paid him as a 1099. So the advantage to us, first of all, is we don't have to mess around with benefits if we didn't have any sort of benefits at this point. I think I don't know how real this is in practice, because Cardinal Peak still uses 1099s, but not, but it's just minority of our team. But there's kind of an implication when you have a 1099 that the 1099 relationship is somehow less secure job, and that I've got a little less into you than as a W-2 employee. I question in reality how true that actually is at most companies, but that's the way people perceive it. That's the way we perceive it. So anyway, so we created, we started having more work. We hired more people. I don't know. We probably went for about 5 years before we woke up and realized that Cardinal Peak was our next company. And that, so, I mean, for all that time, at that point, we were probably, I don't remember, we were probably up to 10 or 12 people before we realized that, like, hey, maybe we should actually try, with Cardinal Peak. And I do believe when you're doing something, you ought to be putting your entire effort into it. And we didn't do that for the first number of years. And that was a mistake, right? And so if it's worth your time at all, it's worth doing it as best you can. And what we should have been doing, rather than sniffing around and thinking about other, things, other companies we might start, what we should have been doing was, if we're going to have employees and try to be a services company, we should try to be the best damn services company that we can figure out. And it took us a while to come to that, because, not fast. So anyway, that was that. Then eventually we did decide that Cardinal Peak was our next company. We did along the way spin out. There's a second company that we have called Cardinal Peak Technologies, which today are completely two separate companies. But through that period, as we were wandering around, we had a consulting gig where we helped build a in-police car video recorder. So most police cars, at least in the U.S., I don't know internationally, but they have a number of cameras and there's basically a recorder in there that is trying to record everything that goes on. This is where all the video from those shows like Cops comes from. And there's different guys making this, but somebody had come to us and asked us, a company who sold to police had come to us because of our video background and asked us to make this in police car video recorder. And so we had done that. And, imagine this thing has camera pointing out the front. It has a camera focused on the back. The officer's wearing a microphone, a wireless microphone. There are hidden microphones inside the car. By the way, if you're, heaven forbid, ever arrested and put in the back of a police car with your accomplice, don't sit there and confess to the crime. They're warning it. People do that. So anyway, we built this thing. We were out in Illinois, the state of Illinois, in the early 2000s, beta testing it with the police. So with our customer, the customer is called Decatur Electronics. I think they've gone now, they're out of business. But anyway, Decatur had hired us to build this thing. We were out doing ride-alongs with the police to help show them how to do it and get their feedback on the system. It was a very early introduction of the system. And at that time, the state of Illinois was the first in the United States to require recording of what's called custodial interviews. And custodial interview is what the other side of in the police car, those guys are uniformed officers, okay? Patrolmen, they offer patrol officers, they call. And then the other side of it is investigators. And so we weren't in there talking to the investigators because our product was sold to the patrol side. But we were on a break. We started making up a conversation with these guys. And so one thing led to another, and they said, gosh, we would like to have a way to record our interviews. When they say interview, you should hear interrogation. And so, and by the way, there is like what they show on TV where they all have that like one-way, the one-way mirror. That's like almost nowhere. Nobody does it. Those rings haven't existed for 40 years, okay? And there are a few of them, and the way where I saw them, where I've seen them, and I've been in a lot of police stations, they're all back east, around one. So anyway, instead, what there is there's a camera hiding in the thermostat, which isn't really a thermostat, okay? So anyway,
Can all of this be aired? Can all of this be aired on a podcast?
By the way, anybody who's listening, if you're ever arrested, heaven forbid, okay, your answer needs to be, I want my lawyer, and then shut up, right? Polite to do that, okay? They read that. That's part of those Miranda rights they read you. Nobody does that. Everybody, when you're arrested, even if you did it, I guess the psychology, I assume the psychology is yeah, I know this kind of looks bad, but if you'd only hear my side of the story, you'd understand why I killed her, or like why I stole the money, or why I stole the car, or whatever. And so you want to explain it to somebody, and the police are very good at exploiting that, and they're going to report it, and then it's going to be shown in court, and you're guilty. So don't do that. But anyway, people do. So thankfully, so we have a product. This is a long story. We ended up creating this video recorder because, of course, we thought that the hard thing to do was to engineer a product, and the easy thing to do once you had built the product was to sell it. I no longer think that. But we did that, and we spun out this company called Cardinal Peak Technologies out of Cardinal Peak. So that today is like about another, I think it's 11 people as a separate management team. Furcat serviced the board for that too. They're two totally separate companies. Unfortunately, I probably, going back in time, I would not have named the second company so similar to the first company, but we did. So anyway.
Yeah, sure.
So the experiences that you had, like you had to like, I mean, you spun out two companies, and then you had to probably bring in investors for that as well. So that brings me to my next question of how you actually network with people. Like, how do you do it on a day-to-day basis?
Okay, so one little clarification. We don't have any investors in either of these two companies. So one of the things that characterizes my two companies now is that our vision was smaller, okay? Largely because we didn't have investors. We're not made of money ourselves. So we built these two companies, up by the bootstrap, right? So we never, aside from I think when we started Cardinal Peak, I think we each put in $5,000, which at that time was like, a lot. I mean, was a lot of money. But other than that initial capital that we used to buy two computers and a coffee machine, I don't think we had. Well, I know we didn't put in any additional money. So, okay, but networking is very important. And I would say that we've networked to all the business we've ever got. Okay? So networking and sales are kind of, in my view, two sides of the same coin. Especially technical people tend to look at sales as this dirty thing. And look, I don't like doing it either. Honest to goodness, I would prefer not to network. In my perfect world, I would sit here and like write some code or whatever, do almost anything else other than talk to people. So I feel like people sometimes see me as an extrovert, but I actually feel like I'm an introvert who's learned a bunch of exploit skills to paper over the fact that I don't actually like talk to people. And certainly, most especially, I don't like calling people I don't know that well and asking them for something or trying to, schmooze with them. So anyway, but networking I do think is very important. And so, I had talked about this at the end of one of the classes that we had. I think it's even important as an individual as to how you get your jobs. Especially when you're in college, there's kind of this illusion that companies have this process for hiring, and they do, of course, where they come to your campus and they put up these job descriptions, and then you apply to it, and they've got some sort of defined thing where they maybe ask you some technical questions, and they talk to you, and they look at your resume, and you go through some interviews if you succeed, and eventually, if you're successful, you get the job offer. And of course, that exists, right? And a lot of jobs get filled that way. But a lot of the most interesting jobs, and this is especially so as you get more senior, the most interesting jobs, I think, are never go through that path. And so instead, what happens is that somebody knows somebody. And if you think about it, in order to have a job through the first process, okay, I have to actually have solved all the interesting things that may not be interesting to you as the employee. I have to figure that all out in order to write a job description to conceive of. I have to put some lines around, this is the position I'm looking for. I need an engineer too, and that person has to have these skills. They're going to do this, and they're going to fit into this spot on my org chart. Okay, and that's fine. But a lot of times, the interesting jobs are the ones that don't yet exist on the org chart. And what is interesting a lot of times is to work your way into the person who might have that need. And this is true if you're looking for a job so you can become an employee. And it's also true if you happen to be Cardinal Peak and you're looking to go find a project to do with your engineering team, right? So sometimes people come to us and they've already figured out, oh, I need to build widget X and it has to do this, this, and this, and I need to outsource the creation of it. Okay. And they've already got a very good idea of what it is. That's relatively rare. When they do that, it's a hard job to win because it's so well defined that anybody in the world could compete for it. Okay. And, often they will have written a specification and all that stuff. At that point, what am I competing on? I'm competing on price. Okay. I never want to compete on price, right? I want to compete on anything other than price, because if I'm competing on price, I got to be the lowest guy out there, and I don't want to do that, right? I want to sell something for more money than the cheapest thing. Okay. So anyway, so much more interesting is to get yourself into a conversation with somebody who hasn't yet figured out exactly, they know they need something maybe, but they haven't yet exactly figured out what that needs to be. And this is absolutely true as me trying to sell Cardinal Peak engineering services. And I think it's also true as you as a person trying to figure out your next engineering role. Maybe right out of college, you go through the first process, okay? And you say, hey, I'm going to work for, Apple, right? And great. And, you've bitten into a predefined process. But relatively soon, if you have an entrepreneurial bent, I think you want to get yourself out of that kind of track and get onto the other track where you start talking to people and try to be creative about coming up with a solution to a problem they haven't fully articulated.
Okay.
Interesting. So anyway, so that's what we try to do at Cardinal Peak. I don't know. Is that
And how do you as a follow-up to this, while you were working with DevCon, how did DevCon go about raising their capital, and how important was networking at that point? Because we did not have online networking platforms at that point. So how did DevCon investors?
How did we live before LinkedIn and Google? Okay, it was amazing. Although I think I recall running out to the bathroom in the snow out then. I was not involved in the fundraising for Divicom. I could tell you how it happened. And it was networking. So the original CEO and kind of main founder of Divicom, who's a brilliant guy named Nolan Danes, Nolan was a executive of some sort. I don't actually know what his title was. Already in the very early portion of video compression. Okay, at a company called Compression CLI, Compression Labs Inc. And he got to know some people within a French conglomerate. There's a French company called Sagem. I haven't looked into Sagem for years, but at the time they were a little bit like a smaller, but a little bit like a General Electric. Okay, they had very big company in France. In Paris, had kind of businesses in a lot of different angles, and also Silicon Valley has been a hot thing for 40 years. So you had a lot of companies who wanted to invest in startups, okay? And I'm sure that helped. But Nolan was able, he networked to executives at Sagem, and he had an idea for starting a company, and he was able to get these guys from Sagem to invest in us. Yeah, really, because before I was there. And so they were the initial capital. He also raised some other capital from a more established Silicon Valley firm called C-Cube. C-Cube itself was venture funded, and at this point, I think was public already, maybe not, I can't remember. But certainly established enough that they could put some money into what became Divot. The Sagem was by far the biggest investor. It was not a traditional venture capitalist. C-Cube would have known VCs. They had VCs on the C-Cube board, but the people at C-Cube who made the investment in Divicom were also themselves not VCs. So that was kind of how it got started. It's basically Nolan networked into these guys. And there was tension, by the way, as time went on, and the people who were kind of career middle managers at Sagem in France, Divicom started, I want to say, in 95. So maybe now we're in 97 or something. And these guys who were kind of middle managers started to figure out what the guys like me were making in Silicon Valley. And, of course, we all had stock options and the ability to make quite a bit more if Divicom succeeded, which it did. And I want to be clear, I was not Divicon was a success. I was happy to be part of that success. I didn't make a lot of money at it just because I started out very junior, I wasn't very senior there. So I had a little bit of participation, but I didn't have much. Where was I going with this? So yeah, so gem guys didn't like that, right? They didn't think that in their view of kind of capitalism, it didn't make sense for individuals to be able to make that kind of money. And, of course, what they didn't understand is that Divicom, when it started, probably had a 90% chance of failure and a 10% chance of success. So, if you go rerun the experiment 100 times, 90 times, all the guys who work for Divicom go out and lose their job in 6 months. And that certainly wasn't going to happen to a middle manager working for Sagem in France. So they had zero risk that they were carrying. But, when they saw us have some upside, that was, I think, had some frustration associated with it for that. Anyway, so that's how that happened. When Perk and I we did raise money raised investment capital for Vantum. And how did that work? Well, it's all networking, right? The VCs in the U.S. mostly feel that if you can't figure out how to network to them, you also can't figure out how to network to your customer. They will have I believe, somewhat misleading, and I haven't raised money, just to be clear. I last raised money in like 99 to 2000. Okay. But I believe still, they have on their website this misleading thing that says, drop your business plan here. I'm sure they have some low-paid person who's filtering through that junk. But that you failed the intelligence test if you did it that way. Again, what they want is for you to know somebody who knows them or figure out how you can get that introduction. And that's a far better way to get in really to anything, right? I think this is true if you're selling, if you're trying to find a job, if you're trying to raise money. To get back to your point of networking, it is, how do I get myself introduced to this person in a way that isn't just connect, right? So a cold call is, I look up your name on the website, I pick up the phone. Today you'd email, but why it's called a cold call is you pick up this phone and you're completely cold. They don't know you and you're just trying to get a appointment or whatever. Gosh, the success rate on that sort of thing is tiny. My name is still listed on the Cardinal Peak website. I'm the chairman of the business, but I'm not active day to day, but I'm still listed on the website as one of the founders, and probably as chairman. And I can't tell you how many emails a day I get with people trying to sell me crap. And it's like, mostly they want to sell me. They haven't even done any research, right? It's all this stuff. I don't even know what half of it is, right? I get people approaching me, literally, they want to sell me bags of nuts for the break room. I get a lot of people trying to sell me engineering services. Like, hey, dude, this is the business I'm in. You're compete with me. I'm not going to buy your stuff. All sorts of things. And, I don't even respond. I just can't. I don't want to be mean about it, but like I'm getting so many of these emails, I just delete them all. And occasionally people figure out my phone number and they call me and I let that go to voicemail and I delete the voicemail. And once in a blue moon, I accidentally answer it and then I get angry at them because like they bother me and so that's a crappy way to do business, right? Way better is to go find your way into somebody who I know and then have that person that I know make an introduction, because that I will absolutely respond to. I may still not buy your stuff, but at least I'll have a conversation. And the same thing's true about the venture capitalists.
And I had a follow-up question to this. Now, fast forward to the modern day world. How do you think first-time entrepreneurs who are like just starting out in their venture but do not have contacts around or investors or angel venture capitalists, like how do you think they need to approach networking so that they get funded for their startup?
Like first time people, like let's say me, I do not have a portfolio behind me of say I had so many startups and then I failed or succeeded in them.
Right.
How do I approach somebody for that?
So, okay, couple of thoughts on that. First of all, my advice to people, a lot of people start very successful businesses right where you guys are, coming right out of school. That is not my advice though. Okay. You can certainly do it. Okay. But my advice would be to go off and work for industry, not for a long time, for, 5 years tops. Okay. You will get contacts. It's going to look a hell of a lot better on your resume as you're trying to reach those investors, to say, hey, I'm a former manager from Apple, or I'm a former director from Apple, than it is to say, hey, I'm a, master student from CU. Okay. Master student from CU is fine. I don't mean to knock you down. But But master's student from CU, plus I worked at Apple for 5 years, and I was responsible for, this thing that you heard of, whatever it is way better. And even better than that, to be honest, Apple's a very good company, or Amazon, Google, Microsoft, because those are all great. But in my view, even better than that would be at the most entrepreneurial company you can get yourself into, right? So smaller venture-funded firms, you're just closer to the money floating around. It's a smaller place, right? You're closer to the sales process. You're closer to seeing stuff. In terms of large companies, I would say go work for Tesla. Elon's probably a bitch to work for, but it's got way more entrepreneurial and fast moving than any of the more established folks. But whatever. Okay. So how would I do it? I don't think I have any particular advice. The trick is to find a way to get yourself in front of an investor. I would also this gets into kind of like the risk on the entrepreneurial journey. I would also, the best scenario is one in which you have enough time that you could somehow scrape together that you've actually got ideally a beginning product and some customers lined up. Now, this is hard to do. But in a perfect world, you come find the investor at the point where you've already got, you've got an MVP, minimum viable product, and you've got a couple of customers out there paying you. You could be losing money hand over fist. Nobody cares about that. But you've actually proven that, the VCs have all these funny little sayings, and one of them is the dogs will eat the dog. So, you've got something out there that looks like something folks would want to buy. That makes you a lot more attractive. It probably doesn't help you with the networking side of it, but it makes you a lot more attractive when you get in the door.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
I'm interested in knowing. Okay, now let's say I have you in my network, right?
Yes.
It's not sufficient for me to just say hi, howdy once in a while, and then expect you to do me a favor or introduce me to some
What do you
investor.
absolutely do with that?
No, but how do I generate or cultivate this long-lasting relation with any of my networks so that they're willing to actually help me out when what do I need to do from my end to start that process?
So look, I believe that networking, people look at networking the wrong way. So people do this all the time. Okay, they call up folks in their Rolodex and they ask them for stuff. Okay. And once you get into a position where people can ask you for stuff, you're going to get a lot of people asking you for stuff. Okay. And so the problem is I want to be a helpful guy, but I'm on the receiving end of a lot of requests. Okay. And so that doesn't really work that well. So what does work for me, okay, is, in my position, and I'm not talking about me, Howdy Pierce. I mean, maybe I am, but I'm talking about, let's say I'm a VP of something or other at Apple, okay, or at, Intel or, whatever, some big company. First of all, those people are busy. They have goals themselves, which are uncertain, and they're stressed out about meeting. I think everybody wants to be generally helpful, but, there's a very small limit on that, right? So what does work though is they want to have everybody wants to have a good network. And it's a two-way street. And you may think that as a young person coming up that you don't have much to offer, but I think you do. Okay. So it helps, folks in those positions to know more broadly what's going on. One of the things that I was always able to offer as when I was selling for Cardinal Peak, and I did that by networking, was I had a broader view of the industry than somebody working inside. I had a different, okay? Somebody who, and Apple's never been one of our customers, okay? But let's just say I knew somebody who might be somewhat senior at Apple. Okay, maybe they're like an engineering director or something like that. So that'd be normally at most companies like the second level manager. I might be able to contact them, and from my perspective, of course, I want to go talk to the guy at Apple and find out what his problems are and help them solve them and have him paid. Okay. From their perspective, what are they interested in? Well, they have a very Apple-centered view of the world. Okay. And if they're self-aware, they realize that. So the thing that I've got is, last week I was in a conversation with somebody from Bose, and, 3 weeks ago I was up at Amazon talking to them about their video plan. And of course, all that specific information is confidential, and I'm ethical, and I'm not going to go tell the Apple guy what they're doing with Bose. That'd be horrible. Okay. But I have a broader view of kind of the pulse of the industry and the technologies that are hot, and stuff that's not anybody's confidential information, but what I've got is breadth. Okay. So I can perhaps share insight that may be useful to the person who I'm meeting with. And then hopefully I'm an interesting guy, and I'm not a total pain in the butt to hang out with. And, so like, great, let's go have lunch, right? Everybody's got to eat. Maybe that's not the most important thing that person's doing today, but, it might come to something. So, and I think that applies all across the board. If you're looking to network your way into selling your product for your startup, or getting the next job, or raising capital, what you want to do is find people who, ideally, if you're trying to network into venture capitalists, by the way, you want to find entrepreneurs who have been funded in the past by those VCs.
Okay.
That's the best possible introduction. Okay. And those entrepreneurs themselves are busy, but maybe not as busy. Maybe you can network to them, see, whatever. And everybody's trying to grow their network. Everybody wants to know more about what's happening in the industry, wants to know smart, interesting people. I don't want to know boring, dumb people who don't have anything to say. So, don't be that guy. Okay. But I don't know. That's kind of my take on it. And then I think you really want to think of it more, is my advice always, is think of it more like you're cultivating a friendship rather than I'm asking this guy for a fee. Okay. And I wouldn't ask for a favor. And if you do ask for a favor, don't beat me over the head with it. I think the example I used in our class discussion was, if you're looking for a job for me, or you're looking for my help getting a job, we meet. At some point during the conversation, I'm going to say, hey, what are you up to, Deep? And you're going to say, well, I'm kind of in between work. I'm looking for a new thing. And, I'd ideally like to have X, a position of blah, 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 right? Like whatever you want. And I go, oh, okay. So we move on. Yeah, that's good. I got it, right? I'm a smart guy. Don't, hey, can I give you my resume? Like that. You want to, like, I got it, and maybe I'll follow up, and, maybe afterwards you could follow up, or maybe towards the end of the conversation, if we're breaking up, you're shaking my hand. Hey, let me know if you hear of any opportunities, right? But you want to keep a light touch, right? You don't want to turn this into a transactional thing. You want it to be reciprocal, and think about with your friends how you split up the tab when you guys go out to eat. Okay, I don't know exactly how you guys do it, okay? But then, these days with Venmo, maybe everybody just actually pays. But back in my day, the way it used to work, still today, when I go out and maybe have a beer with some of my buddies, we go to the bar, and one guy throws his credit card down, and he picks up the beers. And, so he buys a round of beers for everybody. Great. And, nobody's paying him back right then, and, whatever. And, and then maybe the next time we go, maybe I throw it on my card, okay? And it's not... we don't explicitly keep track. Certainly if we ever got the feeling that one of the guys in the group wasn't pulling his weight, we might start making jokes about him. And if he doesn't take the hint, we might exclude him. But in general, the way it works with friends is, it's not transactional, right? If I have you over for dinner, if you whipped out your checkbook at the end and offered to pay me for half the cost of the dinner, I'd be like, that's offensive. Don't do that. So, it's not transactional. Whereas, the guy who's running the bar, there's no way he's just going to give me some beers and then just expect it to come out in the wash, right? I mean, what's now beers? That's the transaction. So I think the same thing is true of networking, is you need to keep it in the kind of friend relationship category and not in the transactional business deal category.
That is very, very insightful.
All right. Thanks a lot, Howdy. You shared a lot of insights about how one can approach networking and the importance of getting introduced to investors rather than cold emailing. I think that will be the standout of this conversation. Thanks a lot for your time, Howdy.
You bet. Glad to participate.
I'm so happy we had this conversation. I was in fact telling Diksha that I'm so excited to talk to Howdy again.
Great.
Been talking to all my friends for the past 1 week.
You should name Howard, Johnny, but okay, great.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.